Okay, as an exercise, let's suppose we were given this problem. Calculate the area of a circle, the area of a rectangle, and the area of a right triangle. Okay, so I subdivided the program into different sections to do this within the function main. So one big section is the declaration that includes the declaration for the circle variables, the rectangle variables, and the right triangle variables. So in here, we will designate with the appropriate data types what variables we're going to need to do the calculation of an area for a circle, the calculation area of a rectangle, and the calculation area of a right triangle. This here will be basically the declaration block. So you will not do any calculations or formulas while you're declaring. Next, you're going to assign values to some of these variables that we will label as input variables. So for example, if you were to calculate the area of a circle, then the input variable for that will be the radius. If you were to be asked to input values for the area of a rectangle, then that would be the width and the length. For the triangle, that would be the base and the height. Then, once we have these values, then we can go ahead and apply the formulas for the areas to obtain the result. We would have also declared variables to store the results needed for each section. Circle, rectangle, and right triangle. Then we could reuse these variable values for the output right here to the screen. All right, well, let's get started. So for the circle variables, what are we going to need to be able to calculate the area of a circle? Knowing that the area of a circle is equal to pi times r squared, right? Or the radius squared. So right away, by looking at the formula, right, you're going to realize that, so let's write the formula right here in the comment. Area of a circle, and I'm going to call it just area C, is going to be equal to pi times radius squared. Now, this is not code. This is simply saying that is my pseudocode for this. Pseudocode means this cannot be executed. This is simply saying, what do I need to make this happen? So the caret here is just a signal that says we're squaring the radius. In reality, this would translate to this, pi times radius for this example. Eventually, in another example, we're going to learn about the POW function, which will require a different math library called math.h, which will make this a lot easier in case we need to raise anything to any power. Well, that's for the area of a circle. How about the area of the rectangle? Let's call it rectangle. And that would be width times length, right? So we'll leave that one the way it is. And how about the area of the triangle? And that would be equal to base times height. And then all of that divided by 2, right? It really is it's a rectangle, but a right triangle is half that space, right? Divided by 2. So before you write any code, make sure that you know what formulas you're going to use. Now, why is that important? Because it will allow me to identify what variables I'm going to need. For the circle, I'm going to need radius, pi, and the area, C. So this is here what we call an output variable to store the result. These here will be my input variables. It just happens that radius is multiplied by itself, so you only need it once when you declare it. So pi and radius will be my input variables, and my output variable will be area C. So what kind of variables? These are measurable values like surfaces, distances. These typically should be float, okay? If you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these could be integers. All right, so float, area C will be for my output variable, okay? So let me just write down here next to it. That would be my output variable for this problem. And then we'll do a float for my input variable, radius. Let me put a semicolon there. How about pi? You could have done pi lowercase and then assign it a value. But I am going to make pi separate, and I'm going to make it a constant. Const float pi, now it's all uppercase, and then since it's a constant, give it a value, 3.14, semicolon. So these will be the variables needed to do the circle. Now the reason I want pi to be constant or read only is just in case I want to use it somewhere else again, right? So let's say I was asked to go ahead and do a calculation of the perimeter or the circumference of the circle, then I could reuse the pi, okay? If I were asked to do the volume of a sphere, then I could reuse this pi in the same problem, okay? So, and that way we're consistent with the value for pi that we're using. Now you could set up the precision for pi even higher than this. It all depends on the type of values, input values, specifically for a radius that you're going to be using. So if you have a tape measure, you could be at 2 decimal point precision, 1 precision, or at 1 decimal point. It all depends on how precise your measurements are. Okay? So you have to take that into account when you're dealing with float values. Okay. How about the rectangle? Well, the rectangle, if you notice here, it's got a width, a length, and the area rectangle. So the area rectangle will be your output variable. Your width and length will be your input variables. So let's do that. So float, and what did we call it? Area rect equal, semicolon, and that would be my output variable. Basically the variable where you will store the result and print it out to the screen. Okay? And then we have float, and we have width, and length. Notice separation with a comma. They're the same type. Semicolon. These are going to be my input variables. Okay. And let me see here. I made a little mistake here. Here you go. All right. So we have output variable, input variables. This one here is an input variable. Okay. And so is pi. Okay, how about the right triangle? Well, what we have again are 3 variables, 1 output variable, area TR, and 2 input variable, base and height. And they're all type float. The division by 2, the 2 number, right, it's actually a value that we could use in the formula itself. So there's no need to declare a variable that it has a value of 2, right? And notice the 2 that I wrote here is actually an integer value. But that shouldn't be a problem since we're multiplying 2 float numbers on the numerator divided by an integer. The result is a float. All right, so let's do that here. So float area underscore TR, and that would be for the triangle, semicolon. That would be my output variable. Okay, and then how about my input variables? Float, I have 2 of them, base and width. Okay, semicolon, these will be my input variables. Excellent. Now is a good time to save, compile, just to make sure you don't have any syntax error, and I do. And let's see what's going on here. And I have width. Let's see, variables. Base and width, let's see here. Redeclare, okay, I see it. Very good, this is good. This is really nice. It's the base and height. It's saying that I am redeclaring a variable that I've already declared. That is a good thing that it catches it, that you cannot redeclare something that you've already declared. So base and height. There you go. Better. So now let's compile. So notice I'm compiling, I'm not running it, just to make sure I don't have any syntax error. And we did end up with a syntax error, which, showed us that you cannot redeclare the same variable twice, okay, which is great. Now let's assign values. So for the assignment, I'm going to subdivide this into 3 sections. One that handles the circle, one that handles the rectangle, and then one that handles the triangle, okay, or the right triangle. So I'm going to do something like this. Printf, and I'm going to make it interactive, and circle data input /n. So this would be our section here to do this. And let's do this. So printf, enter a radius, right? So that's the only input really we need to enter for the circles. So scanf. Now remember your radius is a float, so %f and %radius. So do not forget the %. You are storing it at that memory location. Next, the next section is for the rectangle. Printf, rectangle, data input /n. And this time we're going to ask for the width and the length. Printf, enter. Now, maybe this is a good time for me to introduce you to a scanf that inputs 2 variables at the same time. Okay, enter width and length, followed by length. Okay, so we're going to do this in one sweep, just separated by a space. Now watch how this is done. So this is the first time you're seeing this. %f, %f, twice. That means expect from the keyboard 2 floats. And then and %width, comma, and %. And what's the other variable? Length. Okay, now's a good time to compile just to make sure we're not making any syntax error here. Everything looks good. This allows you to enter the width and the length all at the same time. Let's do another section now where we're going to ask the user to do the right triangle. So printf, right triangle, data input. That would be a /n here. We're going to do the same thing. Printf, enter the base followed by the height. We're going to do the same technique where we're going to enter the 2 float values all in the same scanf statement. So %f, %f, no commas in between. However, these parameters have to have, so this is the base and % in the order that you're going to be entering, and then that would be the height. Again, a good time to compile here to make sure You didn't type your variable names the wrong way. Compile. Everything is good. Excellent. So now we're ready to process these results. So before I do that, just a lesson here, you can scan one variable or you can scan two variables at once. So the next lesson, I'm going to stop here so you can absorb this and write this code. And then the next lesson, we're going to process and output. Okay? I will see you then.